Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this QX Global podcast, one of a series of podcasts we're doing called Room to Grow. And these are all focusing on the living sectors, which have been very active sectors for investors over the last few years, one of the most popular sectors globally in terms of investment. And today, I'm delighted to have Steve Moran with me. Steve is the founder of Senior Living Foresight, the publisher also. And I will be asking Stephen in a second to introduce himself. But just to introduce myself first, I am a living consultant to QX Global. I've worked for the last 30, 40 years in the real estate sector, focusing mostly on operational real estate. But we will be focusing predominantly on this call on the senior living market, and particularly the senior living in the market in the US, which is obviously one of the most developed in the world. So, Steve, lovely to have you here. Could you tell us a bit about yourself?
You bet. So, first off, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to be able to have these conversation. I live, eat, breathe, sleep senior living. It's been my passion for the last 15 years. I started this. I kind of stole the idea from somebody who was a friend in the technology space, sort of the business model. And when I first started, I thought I was going to be another news publication in the senior living space. But once I started writing and once I started publishing, what I discovered is the big need was for thought leadership content. So how do we make the lives of people who live and work in senior living, how do we make their families' lives better? And so for the last 14 years, we've been publicly started out as a blog site, publishing, I think the first few months I did one article a week, and then I went to three, and then I went to five. And after about 18 months, I started monetizing it. I was doing two full-time jobs, quit the day job, and have been doing this ever since. As you can see, I'm older than when I started 15 years ago, and I wasn't that young when I
We're all
started.
older than we started.
That's right. And so I have recently, I'm very concerned about I've been very concerned thinking about continuing the legacy and the platform beyond when I either can't or don't want to do this, or I want to go off and pursue some other non-work things. And so recently I sold the company. I'm going to continue leading it for at least the next 3 years. We'll maintain the editorial independence. The buyer is very, very specific about that. The slight name change. So we're now Senior Living Foresight, powered by ProCare. And they're actually going to give us the resources to do a much deeper dive in the content side. So I'm super, super excited. I love the industry like crazy, but I also recognize that we've got some areas that we're a significant room for improvement in a number of areas.
Okay, well, thanks for that background. Can I just ask, related to what you've just said, in the years you've been involved in senior living, what's the biggest change you've seen in the sector?
So it's a really interesting question, and as part of my transition, I'm having a bunch of conversations with CEOs about what kind of content they want, and we got into this conversation a little bit in just the last couple of days, and I think that the thing that's fascinating is that in many respects, it hasn't changed as much as it probably should. I think the buildings have gotten a lot more luxurious. We are talking more about wellness and maybe focusing a little bit more on wellness. I think that dining services are a little more deliberate, are being thought through in a little bit more deliberate ways. I think that there's more thought about how do you create experiences for residents.
Yeah.
It's also gotten much more expensive. The higher margins are in sort of the higher end buildings, and so that's where the investor money is gone. So, but there are people thinking about the middle market as well. Uh, it's better, I think, in many respects, but I also think there are places that could improve. I think there are a lot of people, even in the people who are executives in the senior living, who love being in the business and feel like they're making a difference, but they don't really want to move into a senior living community when they retire.
That's a pretty valid point. I just wonder if one of the issues that is affecting senior living, which is affecting most of the rest of living, is this sort of plague of loneliness that people are feeling these days. Um, in student housing, for example, parents are really worried that their student kids are going to be lonely. And so there are curated events put on, special programs. And indeed, that's happening in built to rent in the UK as well, and in co living communities and so on. Is that something that you're seeing as an increasing area of focus? I think you talked about wellness, so it's part of that, perhaps.
Yes, so I do think it's a part of wellness. We know that there's some data out there that suggests that loneliness is as bad for your health as smoking 3/4 of a pack of cigarettes a day. So loneliness is a big issue. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is the boomer generation that I'm right in the middle of. We are really, really, really looking at this friendship, this companionship kind of thing, and probably more than prior generations. Part of it because we're living longer, part of it is how we grew up. Having friendships, finding new friendships is really, really important, and because of the internet, it's actually harder to do because we spend our days doing things like this all day long, and we have, I mean, I guess I can call you a friend now, but we've never met in person, and we are a long way apart, what, 6,000 miles or something?
Know that.
I don't know whether we'll ever meet in face to face or not, which is really good, but it's not the same as, let's go play a round of golf or have a cup of
Oh,
coffee.
we might be shouting on opposite sides of a golf competition that starts tomorrow, but yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. I guess that is true, and it's about halfway in between, right?
Yeah. So you talked about boomers there. So I'm actually just on the very one of the very last boomers, perhaps in terms of being at the younger end of that trend. About 4 million boomers are going to be turning 80 in the next 5 years, which does suggest that there is going to be a massive need for more accommodation to be built. And when you and I were chatting just before we started recording this, I was saying, well, you're going to have to build 100,000 or so new beds a year through to 2040, and that only 4,000 senior living units, I am reliably told, have been developed in the last 12 months or so in the States. So you perhaps are thinking that it's not quite as dramatic as that, but how, where are these beds going to be found? What's going to happen?
Yep. So, I'm gonna start by saying that the numbers that you quoted are the numbers that virtually every thought leader, every expert in the industry is quoting. I think I'm the only person who at least has a public platform. I know a few other people who would agree with me, but who has a public platform who are saying, "Wait a minute, I'm not so sure that's true." So I'm gonna go back historically about when I first started doing this. So it's been 10 years now. Memory care, so dementia care was just coming to the forefront, and everybody wanted to do memory care. It was the place you build a memory. The idea was you could build a memory care, and there were so many people with Alzheimer's, you could never build enough. And again, massive numbers projected just like that, and everybody went out and built memory care. I was at an investment conference not quite a year ago in Los Angeles, and one of the panels was a bunch of capital providers, and the discussion was, "What senior living types do you like?" The one universal theme there is they were all really nervous about memory care, that the turnover in terms of people coming in and passing away, and you could have a full building one day and be down 15% a week later, and it made them really, really nervous. And in fact, we saw a number of memory care companies fail. So the problem that I see, there are a couple of problems. While I think the demographic numbers are real, people are figuring out ways to be able to stay at home. The harsh reality is that nobody wants to move into senior living. They move almost always. People move in because they either have some physical, cognitive need, or they are anticipating that, or and occasionally it's with a spouse who's maybe failing and they'll move in with the spouse. And so it's still sort of the choice of last resort. It's getting more expensive. And so there are lots of people who just can't afford it. As we talked about off the air, I've just moved my stepfather into a 6-bed community. It's very, very expensive. It's more money than most people could afford. It's more money than I could afford. He's very fortunate. It's an amazing place. He'll have an amazing experience. But a lot of people, before that, I had him in my house, and it was hard work caring for him. And we finally got to the point where we couldn't. And I guess we would still do it if we didn't have financial resources.
We went through that as well with my late dad. It was really difficult and a challenging. And of course, he didn't want to move into there. He had enough wherewithal to know that he didn't want to move into a home, and was very unhappy when my brother and I put him in the home. You talked about the cost there. I mean, I was reading something from the CEO of Aegis Living, Dwayne Clark, who was saying average rents around about $12,000 a month. I don't know where that how that ranks in terms of typical rents on senior schemes. He
So
was saying
that's a pretty high number. Yeah, I know. Let's see. He operates real high-end communities in the, sort of Pacific Northwest, Seattle area. That's really high. I don't know exactly what the averages are. I think they're more in the neighborhood across the country, they're probably more in the neighborhood of 6,000, 5,500. If you go into the deep South and some of the lower costs, you can find senior living for under $4,000 a month. And of course, you go there. I could take you to some buildings, some communities where the fee is going to be north of $20,000 a month.
Dwayne Clark's point was that I think he's recognizing that that's a lot of money, but he was saying that most residents are funding it effectively with the proceeds of the appreciation in the value of their homes that they've been selling or forced to sell. Um, so where they're actually living off that capital appreciation that's happened. And he says it's the high interest rates that are the real barrier to further development. I mean, why is it that so little is being built? Okay, and take your point. Maybe people are over anticipating the actual requirements in terms of number of beds, but whatever the real requirement is, there's no way if we're only building 4,000 new homes a year, we're getting anywhere near enough, are we? Um, what is the problem? Is this a sector specific problem? I mean, this sounds like a real estate generally at the moment. Development has slowed down in many parts of the world.
Yeah, so I think it's almost exclusively an interest rate problem, and I think much of the interest rate problem is that we've gotten so used to these, are really artificially low interest rates that we had for a number of years. When I was when I was a teenager growing up, it was not uncommon to see home mortgage rates of 2, 3, 4%, right? And then we saw where there was even a period of time when Jimmy Carter was the U.S. president. We actually had 18% home mortgage rates. Then, of course, almost nobody bought houses or sold houses then. And then we sort of we got used to this idea that home mortgage rates and commercial building rates were going to be in the 5, 6, 7, 8% rate. And all of a sudden we had this economic collapse, and the interest rates came plummeting down to 2, 3, and 4%. And we started talking to ourselves like that would last forever. I think it was unrealistic. So, but things are changing. I was just at the National Investment Center's annual fall conference in Austin, and I don't know that I've ever been to a more positive senior living conference, particularly in the finance side. So interest rates are two things are happening. Interest rates are starting to ease a little bit. There's a recognition that with higher occupancy right now, the senior living asset class is the most profitable class of all classes of real estate. So there's a lot of interest available, a lot of money available right now. And rates are going up and labor is stabilizing and other costs are stabilizing. So I would expect that we will see a substantial increase in construction starts in the next 12 to 18 months. Will we get to 100,000 units a year? No way. But I don't think we need 100,000 units. We still have, we have lots of people who are at 100%, but Brookdale's still in the low 80%, and they have 400 units, so 400 buildings.
The weight of capital, though, that is trying to invest in living sectors, and as you've mentioned, this is probably the most successful of the living sectors in the States. That weight of capital is phenomenal, isn't it, at the moment? And a lot of that has come from the big funds and the REITs and the pension funds reallocating capital that was previously in the office commercial sector through to, I suppose, things like logistics, healthcare, um, these sectors, data centers, I suppose, as well. Um, that capital that is being is there looking for opportunities at the moment. It's struggling, isn't it, to find the right opportunities. Um, a lot of the people who are buying up are buying standing stock because there's relatively little development happening, and they're buying standing stock. Interestingly, it's suggested typically at below replacement cost, which seems a fantastic opportunity. What a great opportunity to be able to get in. Okay, you're going to have to do some improvement works, perhaps, but if you're getting it at below replacement cost, that's going to give some people some great returns, isn't it?
It is, and I think that the number of those properties is drying up, and as they continue to come on, the market, they're gonna be um, rougher properties that are gonna need more investment, and at times, frankly, they're gonna be buildings that have really structural obsolescence. The units are not laid out very well. They're not big enough, and yet the opportunity with those, I think, they also represent an opportunity for the middle market where people are gonna say, "It's not really what I want, but it's what I can afford." And so, it's gonna be a very, very dynamic, marketplace over the next few years. There continues to be a lot of fear that somebody like Amazon or Google is going to, as part of their push into wellness, are gonna start looking at aging and either, I don't know, maybe get into senior living or create something that we haven't even seen yet to be a threat to the industry.
Yeah, have you? Has there been much debate about what that might be, what the shape that might be?
I mean, I think we certainly know that home is the biggest risk, right? It's where people want to stay, and there are more and more options. When I was at the conference in Austin a couple of weeks ago, I got a chance. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, but when I called up my Uber rides twice, I got Waymo cars, so they're driverless cars, and it was a fine experience. I'll tell you, my for me. I never felt afraid. The weirdest part was I sort of get used to doing chit chat when I get inside the car, and I start think I have to have this conversation with somebody, and there's nobody to talk to because this is steering wheel turning on its own.
Were you also not frantically trying to push your foot on the brake or the accelerator as well?
No, I sat in the back seat, so I didn't even have that option. Although I guess I could have sat in the front. Maybe next time.
Getting back to senior living, one of the key concerns is the high cost and affordability. We just touched on that earlier. And rents have been going up about 5%, I read. Um, Financial burden, long term cost of care is really prohibitive, isn't it, for a lot of people? Um, so, are there any ways you think that operators and maybe developers are able to design lower operating costs, or maybe with efficiencies in operation that can enable a more economic package for the end user?
There are certainly a number of people who are trying some interesting experiments. The one I actually like the best is there's a guy by the name of Joe Jasmine out of Florida, and he's got his first community up and running. And it's sort of a pod concept where he's got, I think, about 60 units. If he's listening to this, I'm sure I'll get many of the details wrong, but the concept is right. And they have a central kitchen where they do all the heavy duty kitchen cooking, and then They take the food. Then each pod has got 15 or 16 units, and they're staffed like they're separate units. And then they have universal workers. And for a sort of an equivalent level of senior living in terms of lifestyle and food and those kinds of things, he's doing it for about $1,000 less than comparable buildings around. That's a big savings, and he is it actually turns out for many people it's a better lifestyle, and so I think we're gonna continue to see that. I think some of the older obsolete properties will be rehabbed into a lower rate. There are a couple of companies. I actually toured a building, mystery shopped a building just a week or so ago with a friend. We happened to be having lunch, and we decided on the spur of the moment to go mystery shop this building that's down the street. And they're an independent living, but they have a home care agency inside the building, and so they're able to control costs that way to some degree.
Yeah. And there's a staffing issue, isn't there? I know certainly in the UK, it's pretty low wage sector, and people have trouble holding on to the staff they've got. And there's a lot of um, people who've come in who, frankly, it's not necessarily what they really want to do. So the whole staffing side is a real dilemma for the big operators over this side of the pond. Uh, I'm sure that is going to be a challenge to some extent in the States as well. Do people talk to you a lot about recruitment and staffing as a challenge?
So I would tell you that it's an area that I spend a lot of time on. I'm very passionate about. Uh, Again, I was at the conference, and staffing came up as both the cost and availability, and turnover became came up as a big topic. And yet I had, it had turned out in this particular case, we all collided at the same time, 2 CEOs who, I'm friendly with, who I have great respect for, and we were talking about it, and, they don't have any staffing problems. They have plenty of applicants, they have low turnover, their existing staff does most of their recruitment for them. So we're competing with things like people who work for Starbucks and McDonald's, and offer purpose and the ability to make a difference in people's lives, something that McDonald's and Starbucks can't do in a meaningful way. And so when we take our team and we help them see that vision for changing the world, and we respect them and we treat them well, they would rather work for senior living. And so when I hear operators talk about, and I'm convinced this is true on the other side of the pond as well, that this is completely a solvable problem. And I'm guessing you have some operators there who are doing this. That when you treat them with respect, you actually don't have a staffing problem. The staffing problem should be at McDonald's and Starbucks and Kentucky Fried Chicken. It shouldn't be in senior living. So,
Yeah.
as you can see, there's several areas where I'm a bit of a contrarian with the rest of the industry.
Well, it's you're allowed to be that when you're one of the senior boomers or mid-range boomers.
That's right.
Um, we're running out of time. There's a few more areas I'd like to just briefly cover with you. Um, Regulation and oversight, and it varying sort of from state to state, and perhaps being a bit inconsistent. Is that still an issue, or are we beginning to see more of a national standard?
I think it's still for assisted living, it's still state to state. Every indication I have is that while there is some push to do some national regulation, that the federal government is such a mess right now, and they're fighting over so many other things that nobody's really that interested in trying to tackle the senior living space as a national issue. And there are and on the assisted living side, there are not that many problems, really. I mean, you might find some exposés, but overall, most customers are really happy with the product.
Um, Couple more questions. Owners versus managers. What's going on there? What are the
So
contrasts?
yeah, so it's a great question, and it's something that I haven't spent as much time thinking about as I'd like to, and I'm going to spend some more time thinking about. But one of the things that used to be that you would have operators who were pretty much all owners. They might have outside investors. They might even do a few contract. contracts for investor groups. Today, we have thousands and thousands of senior living communities that are owned by investment groups. REITs are probably the most prominent, but family offices and pension plans and all kinds of things. And then they go out and they hire third-party managers who typically get a percentage of the revenue. There may be some bonus opportunities, but the problem I see with that is that everybody's sort of aligned to maximize short-term profits, and that may not ultimately be best for the residents. And as occupancy goes up, residents may have to put up with less quality care because that's all that's out there, or the full build of the places with better quality care don't have any openings. And so I worry a lot about that. If you're an owner of a building, it's like your reputation is on there. I own a building that says Steve's, it may not have a different name, but it's got Steve's Senior Living there. And I'm going to really care about the quality of the community. Although I'm saying that, I'm thinking of somebody I know where that's the case and the quality is terrible. So I don't, but
And a lot of these owners, of course, are in a generational shift, as you mentioned to me before we started recording. There's something of a succession going on now, and they're beginning to think about how they're going to exit or how they're going to pass it on to someone else. What's happening there? What are they doing?
Well, I think that the question is really, there's a whole group of people who are my age. A few of them have already retired. A lot more are still very dynamic, and they're thinking and they're looking to make it better. And I think one of the things that excites me about it is there's this generation of people who are in their 60s and some in their 70s, and they've had some success. And so they're really able to step back and say, what else can we do to make this business better? A lot of conversation about wellness right now and health span. But I think that as I look at it, and the reason I sold is we've created something very, very special with Foresight. We're having a huge impact on the industry. The content we put out makes the lives of people who live and work in senior living better because leaders read it and they think about it. I've gotten so many emails from people who said, "Oh man, I read that article and I've used it for training. I've seen that video. I've used it for training to improve what we're doing." And so I think that for me and for a lot of people, they're looking at it and they're saying, "I've got sitting in this head of mine all this wisdom and knowledge, and how do I pass that on to another generation?" They're still going to have to learn a lot of stuff on their own, right? But how do I help give them as much of that as I can? A few years ago, my father passed, and he was a physician. He was one of the pioneers in emergency room physician. And even in his late 80s and 90s, if I had some medical question, I'd call it, "Hey, Dad, what does this mean?" And he was sharp, and he'd answer the question. And it's sort of, yeah, as he took his last breath, it was sort of, one of the things that went through my mind is there's this treasure trove, and it's all gone.
Yeah.
And we want to pass much of that on.
It's quite a nice sort of personal note to finish on in a way. This is we're coming into this from a property perspective, but this is a people business, and talking about wellness and health span, quality of life, ultimately, that's the most important thing. And I very much hope that all those working in the sector are going to be prioritizing that. Steve, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And I wish you all the very best as you're under new management, so to speak. Good luck with the community, with your ongoing role for the next few years with that. And thank you very much.
Philip, thank you very much. It's been a great conversation. Thank you to QX Global for making this happen.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.